I'm Chris Pemberton, and I'm a Saluki.
No! Get out of here! I'm Nina Pemberton, and I am an ISU Redbird. Bird fans for life.
I guess I'm okay with that.
Go Birds!
Hello, fellow Redbirds. Welcome to Bird Fans Forever, podcast number 23. If you're new to our channel, you should check out our @BirdFansForever Twitter account and follow in order to get a first notice of new videos that we publish. You can follow along there also for information and fun polls. Our website is www.birdfansforever.com, and on there you can find our links to all episodes of our podcast across a plethora of apps. Apple, Google, Spotify, and others, as well as a tab to access our videos on YouTube, where we are also called Bird Fans Forever. So dunk on the YouTube subscribe button and follow us on Twitter so you'll be the first to see new episodes and get other fun information from us. Our guest for today is Larry Lyons, who was in the athletics department for 33 years and was at Redbird's athletic director from 2013 to 2020. We'll be right back with Larry.
This is Bird Fans Forever. This is episode 23 with Larry Lyons. Larry Lyons started in 1987. I started in 1985, so I was there when Larry started. This was awesome. So, Larry, thank you for being on. We usually start this out with, how'd you get to ISU? So we'll start with that one.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to having the conversation with you.
Love it.
How did I get to ISU? How much time do we have?
This is the Larry Lyons show now, as long as you need.
All right. I'll try and give you the Reader's Digest version, but I have a biology degree from the University of Illinois, and I wanted to be an eye doctor, and I didn't get into optometry school, so I had to retool. So I ended up, and I'm from Pontiac, my wife and I ended up in Bloomington. I'm taking night classes in accounting because I figure I can retool through the accounting mode and can take night classes, work full-time. Passed the CPA test. I was working with some local accounting firm, Dunbar. Great people.
Yeah.
Illinois grads, Illinois State grads. Thought, this is a place that I can sink my teeth in and work my way up to partner. And 2 years in, I get pulled over by my supervisor. She said, "There's a job at ISU we think you'd be perfect for." And my first thought is, what am I doing wrong here? And that's not the case. I was kind of the sports guy. I still had football tickets over in Champaign, and the partners were, like I said, Illinois and Illinois State guys, and it was for the first assistant AD for business and finance that Illinois State would ever have, and Bob Frederick started the search. And
so Bob Fredericks. We were wondering if you were with Ron Wellman or Bob Fredericks.
Well, Frederick started the search in the spring, and then he took the Kansas job, and they delayed the search, and finally hired Ron, and then they started the search again. And I somehow made it as one of the finalists, and he called me on a Friday and said, "Larry, I'd like to offer you the job." And I said, "Well, this is a pretty big move for me. I'm gonna leave a pretty good career, and I'm very, very, very interested. But I want you to meet my wife. I think it would be important for her to maybe understand a little bit more who you are and what your vision is and that kind of stuff." And we met at Bennigan's. Remember the old Bennigan's there on Veterans Parkway? He was leaving to go back home, and he said, "Yeah, let's meet real quick at Bennigan's." We walk in and sit down, and, "Hi, Ron, this is my wife, Maureen, and very interested in the program and what you have to say." And he just about started to talk a little bit, and she looked in his baby blue eyes and said, "We're in." So she accepted the job. Then I very quickly said, "Yes, I agree. We're going to do this." And I started in August of 1987. Another important hire came that time too. Julie Morgan was hired. Yeah. We came in at the same time. So very atypical for somebody to come back then from outside the athletic world into the athletic world. And one of the questions I had to the search committee was, I am an accountant. I passed the CPA test, and I think I can handle that side of the job, but I don't know anything about college athletics other than I'm a fan. And most fans think they know more than they know, but I was, even back then, I was smart enough to say, I'm not sure that, I really am, what you're looking for. And they said, no, that's not it. You're exactly what we're looking for. We need somebody to come in and get the business side squared around. We'll teach you athletics, which I thought was very, very interesting. And it was a great move for me, obviously personally, professionally, and then it ended up being a really good move for the family. Matt was 3. My daughter Kristen had just been born. She was 8 weeks old when we took the job. So, very interesting that I ended up at Illinois State, coming from public accounting. But again, it was an internal job. It was a business finance job. So.
Right.
And in 1987, Redbird Arena had just broken ground, right?
Yeah, it was the outside shell was up. It was a dirt floor still. The roof was not on it. That was interesting. And our office was the little 2-story brick brown bungalow just north of the Bone Student Center. You come out of the gates, and that very next block.
You weren't at Horton?
We were now. Ron's office was Horton. Linda, everybody was in Horton, but the business office was basically brand new. We kind of put it together, and we were in that little brown bungalow there just north of the Student Center. It was really a great place for an office. The coaches had to come to us, which sometimes they liked it, sometimes they didn't. But it was a good place to start. And then when the arena opened, a lot of it wasn't finished. Most people don't remember that.
God, it was dirt floors on the. Yeah. When we got in trouble, if the girls were practicing, we'd have to run. You'd run through the halls on the one side, which was all done, and the other side was all dirt on the other side.
It was all dirt. It was like moon dust, about 3 inches deep. And I remember one time that's where we used to store some of our old files that we had to keep. And I was down there looking for something, and I heard somebody turn all the lights off and start giggling. Because you can imagine you're down there, it's pitch black, and then there's those concrete pillars. You got to try and find your way out of there. Was it Tom? I don't know who did it. Nobody ever owned up to it. But it's one of those things. I'm walking out, just trying not to break my face, walking into a pillar. But it was in. Not everything up on the concourse level was finished. It was the basketball offices on the one side, and on the other side, there was a little bit of an arena office, and then concessions had what is now the AD suite. When we did some remodeling on the arena office side, that's when the business office moved over right after the building opened. So
yeah.
But as a finance major. Or accounting major, right? But you're doing financials. That's one of the biggest capital expenditures back then.
Yeah,
right?
and
you got to. I mean, that was a great thing to dive into, right?
Yeah, it was really interesting. And a lot of people think that tax dollars are going to athletics. That's not true. In the state of Illinois, there's no tax dollars. And I called it the color of money. That's one thing you had to learn pretty quickly is different colors of money can only be used for certain things. Redbird Arena had its own budget, and you couldn't commingle Redbird Arena money with Horton Fieldhouse money, or you couldn't commingle Redbird Arena money with athletic operations. So understanding those different colors of money and utilizing them appropriately, you had to get used to the state system. And in athletics, the state system didn't make any sense to us. In a way that we could communicate it to our coaches. Coaches, their travel budget and their recruiting budget and, their equipment budget and, the different things that you would spend on a sport. Well, in the state of Illinois, it was called different things. And so we essentially created a separate set of books on Lotus 1, 2, 3. That's how old I am.
Oh,
wow. Yeah.
On Lotus 1, 2, 3. And we were producing financial statements that we would put out every month. That we had to reconcile back to the university financials. And again, they weren't the same thing. The line items were completely different. But we wanted to do it so that it was easier on our coaches and our administrators to understand what those financial statements were. Now, we had some help down the road because shortly thereafter, maybe the early 90s, the NCAA came out and said, we need a standard kind of a reporting line from everybody. Now, every university is different. Public, private, everybody does things a little bit differently, but we need everybody use kind of the same nomenclature. And when they did that, it certainly made our jobs easier because we said, hey, NCAA said we got to report it in these ways. We're still going to reconcile back to the university, but it made much more sense to talk in athletic lingo as opposed to talking in, they called it the CUSIS code, the state accounting system.
Right. All right, so the next easy question is, in episode 13, my coach, Jay Lowenthal, was talking about calling up Coach Bender, and Coach Bender giving him the runaround and finally said, yeah, the job's yours, but now you got to be in Larry Lyons' house at 10 o'clock tonight, so go give the recruit to somebody else and meet me. So I've now heard this story now a couple times from different coaches that meeting went a long time. You guys were up having some beers, planning out the entire who was staying, who was going, what did the staff look like. So now you and Jay go way back.
Yes. Jay and I are from the same hometown, Pontiac, Illinois, one of the great little towns in Illinois, right there on the Mother Road, Route 66. Jay and Bob, I'm a year older than those two guys are. And Jay and Bob were two of the best guards in the state of Illinois their senior years in high school. Those guys knew each other pretty well. Camps together. Pontiac and Bloomington played back then. They might have both been in the Corn Belt back then, if I remember. Bloomington came up and played in the Pontiac Holiday Tournament, which is one of the greatest high school holiday tournaments in the country. So those guys knew each other, and just, because I was a friend of Jay, I got to know Bob too. I don't know if they told you the story, but I was the one that drove up to O'Hare to pick Bob up to bring him in for his interview. I'm not for his interview, for his press conference. For his press conference.
Okay.
And that was back when you could drive up to O'Hare and basically get out of your car and walk in and go get somebody, then come back to your car. That's when it used to be easier. So, and I knew Bob, since I knew Bob, it was easier for me to go up and get him. We stopped in Oak Brook on the way back so he could buy a suit to wear to the press conference. But yeah, we ended up at my house on Sheridan Road in Normal, and there might have been some adult beverages. There might have been some stories about high school and college and the summers, particularly the summers when everybody was back, and back when Bob had hair, he was a handsome man. I can say that.
He has still got.
Yeah, he does, and he knew his way around the fairer sex, and we had a lot of fun back when we were growing up. But we did spend some time down in my basement discussing the future of Redbird basketball. And me being naive enough, I've been on campus for 2.5 years or something like that when Bob was hired, thinking I had a little more power than I really did, as we were talking about who and what and when and where and how and all that kind of stuff. But that was a really fun time because the guys that Bob hired, not only Jay, but Billy King and Ray Giacoletti, just wonderful people. And again, we were young enough back then too that it was a lot of fun. I mean, we won early, had that one tough year, but it was great for Illinois State basketball. It was a very tough decision for Ron Wellman to make, to make a change at the time that he made the change, but it was a great hire.
So were you involved with making that decision, making the change, right, to move on to interview new persons?
Ron was one of the things that I really took from Ron was he didn't make decisions in vacuums. He asked for opinions, and back then Linda Herman was there. Mike Hamrick was on the external side. Yep. I was on the internal side. Donna Taylor was the student support person. That was his.
She helped. She got 4 of us through that year, right? Sonny, Gerard, and I, and Lindy. I mean, that was huge for the men's basketball program to graduate.
So he used his
right. We didn't graduate.
He used his leadership team to help him. So I was learning an awful lot about not only the hiring process, but in reverse. I hate the word fire. can we say that somebody was replaced or let go? I just, when
Yeah.
I haven't used that word.
right,
Yeah.
it sounds so derogatory, but when it was pretty obvious a change needed to be made, but that was at a time that very popular, successful coach, very had a very good relationship with the local editor of the paper.
Still does.
It was going to be an interesting thing to go through. So I was involved, but as more on a junior side, because and it's okay because
Right.
again, athletic directors do it differently. But again, I learned that the more eyes you have on a situation and the more opinions you have on a situation, the better off you're going to be when you make the decision. And it's on the hiring side too. The more people that are involved, and then you learn to trust the people you're with. Ultimately, we developed what we called the process. When we hired people, we followed the same process, and we try to teach new athletic directors the process. We have certain questions we're going to ask. Certain person's going to ask the same question every time. Now, it's evolved in that, you do a phone interview and then you start to do things in person. And back then you would go out and see people. Always trying to hide it from the media too.
Right.
Yeah, obviously that process has changed dramatically because of HR rules and things like that. But if you followed your process and you asked your questions, you got a pretty good read on people. And then the conversation would go, what's the best fit? I mean, I think there's too many times that, and I was talking, Coach Peden was a guest on Coach Spack's radio show tonight. And I was talking to Ryan before the game about hiring, and we were talking about things that had happened in the world of athletics in the last, at different institutions around the country. And I said too many times, and it's not just me, but people will make a hire to win a press conference. Well, winning a press conference doesn't win a game. It just makes people feel better for a little bit. To me, hiring is timing and fit. The timing is always different, and the fit is always different. It may be Illinois State basketball or football, whatever it is, but the circumstances should dictate who the person is you're trying to hire at that particular time. Obviously, they got to fit your culture and blah, 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 but every time that there's a change in a coaching staff, the needs are different. And it's just, again, it goes back to timing and fit. And Ryan and I were talking about that. And one of the first lessons from Ron was trying to figure that particular piece out and get more people in the room with you. But I knew Bob, so I was the Uber driver way back then.
So Larry, now that you're at ISU, you were there for over 30 years, like 33 years, right?
Yes.
Tell us about a couple of your favorite moments at ISU.
I would think probably the most favorite moment was the FCS championship game down in Frisco. Redbird Nation showed up. I think the Bison were a little bit surprised because they had kind of owned that town for a while. But that whole sequence of games, we got to go out to Eastern Washington. They had beat us a couple years before. I mean, I was as cold as I've ever been out there on that red turf. We beat them. There was a tragedy at the end of the game, if you remember. One of their offensive linemen's dad had a heart attack in the stands, which delayed the end of the game. But there was a point in the game, and we were running all over him. Cam Meredith made a one-handed catch in the end zone right in front. They had some portable bars set up or tents down there right outside the end zone. And he made a one-handed catch for a touchdown and then kind of did one of these things. And the people, the looks on their faces like, oh, these guys are good. And but we beat Eastern Washington, and then we got to go all the way to New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And we go out there, and they were ranked, obviously higher than us because we had to go out there, and we do our thing. We get the stop. And it was, I have to be on the radio then right after that game telling people what we're going to do for the championship game. It's like, oh, my God. I honestly didn't think that, it was going to get to this point. And then it was just a sprint to get everything ready for Frisco. And, obviously it was a great experience down there. And we just ran out of time. But to see a football team rally Redbird Nation and think back, who would at that time we thought would go to a national championship? You weren't thinking football would go to a national championship. That's such a great job that Brock did. But I would have to say competitively, that has to be the one because it was a national championship. But all of the NCAA tournaments for all the sports were always very, very special. Winning the Missouri Valley Championship in '89 at home in Redbird Arena, 89, 90, that year, that crowd. I mean, thank God the fire marshal didn't come in that night. All those competitive successes. Baseball winning at Louisville a few years ago.
How was that?
It was just
that was
awesome. Soccer winning the first women's soccer winning the first MCA tournament game that anybody in the Valley had ever won, and we won at Louisville. All those kinds of things, the competitive successes are obviously highlights, but just the transformation of the athletic department from '87 on, Redbird Arena, Hancock Stadium, Duffy Bass Field, all those brick and mortar things that you can look back on that were the transformation of the institution from this little sleepy college town, we're only producing teachers, to, what? We're the best darn undergraduate institution in the state of Illinois. Let's start acting like it. And what the institution has done and again, it goes back to great leadership on the institutional side, but, you renovate Schrader Hall and you build a college of business. And, if you haven't been back to the Student Center, oh my God, you need to come back into Bowen Student Center. One of the greatest quads that on a college campus. And I remember we were, I'll come back to Hancock Stadium, but we were up in Hancock Stadium. It was a football recruiting weekend, and Brock allowed me to come up and say a few words, and I was talking to the group, and it was the parents and the kids, and I said, look out that two-story glass window and look across Main Street, and you can see the College of Business and Cook Hall, and you can see Watterson, and you can see Bowen Student. What a great view that is. I said, that's what college looks like in the Midwest. That's what it's supposed to look like. That's the feeling you're supposed to get. And when you walk on that quad, you're in a real school that you're going to have great memories from. So to watch athletics evolve, to watch the institution grow into what is its rightful place. We are Illinois State University, and we're second without a doubt. There's been so many great memories. The travel stories, it's just, you could all go on and on and on and on. But to watch those transformations has been very, very special to be a part of it. Pay a little bit of a part of has been pretty cool for me.
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts on the things you're talking about. I mean, so we were there in the fall of '84 through '88, John and I. And I don't think I'm making a big statement here. We were a basketball school back then, right? And volleyball was really good, but I mean, football wasn't really. We did have one winning season, but it wasn't on the map, right? And to see that growth, right? And
it's been awesome.
Of all the programs, you know what I mean? It's much more complete than it was back then. And we sat in that championship game, and I'll say one thing: North Dakota State having to play the day before, right, and winning, and then being able to buy all those tickets up ahead of time. That wasn't fair. But we were in Jon Diener and I. We were sitting in Naperville in a bar just full of Redbird fans. I mean, it was unbelievable. Like you didn't see that before, and to come there for football, unbelievable. Unbelievable. The whole
in Colorado in Denver, and the Denver Redbird Coalition had sent out. And we had the whole bar. It had to be 150 people in the bar on a Saturday, and my kids were with me. And so
the alumni office did a wonderful job of putting together those off-site watch parties and things like that. They did just an incredible job of that. I'm going to go back to another. This was a football basketball same day. We're playing at Appalachian State. I think it was the quarterfinals.
Oh, I know
and men's basketball was at Louisville. So the fans were split up a little bit. I think President Bowman was with us at Appalachian State, and we blocked the extra point in overtime to win the game. And just 2 or 3 minutes later, we're still in the game at Louisville. That could have been one of the greatest days in the history of ISU athletics if we wouldn't have had a couple whistles go a different way, or if they would have maybe called a foul.
Yes.
Tyler Brown was fouled.
I think Jackie Carmichael was fouled. But you think about just the things like that. That again, it's college athletics. There's nothing like it. There is really, in terms of getting fans getting on board and the pure emotion and the joy, and and then we've got the absolute awful plane crash. It's 3 months after the national championship game. It's the whole circle of life thing there that's going on. That's what's special about being on a campus and being with young people and watching them grow and mature, and trying to make decisions in their best interest, that sort of thing.
The one thing I want to reiterate and echo what you just said, the institution, like in the mid and late 80s, we were the 4th largest state university. So kids probably don't even know it. Like Northern was bigger, Southern was bigger, much bigger. Okay. And ISU's stayed pretty steady, the enrollment, all these years. And with all this, it's very popular now, right, for kids in the state of Illinois to go out of state for various reasons. We don't have to get into why. But for the institution to keep that number of people, right, and that population, it's a credit to them, right? I mean, they invested and it's paid off, where I think other institutions probably regretfully have looked back and probably didn't do some of the same things they should have.
They did. Again, we're not going to disparage anybody, but the strategic planning that was being done on Illinois State's campus, the very thoughtful upgrades to facilities, figuring out who they were and where you were going was huge. And Illinois State. And it's going to get a little bit bigger, when the nursing thing, when they get the building built and they can bring more kids in. I tell you what, engineering is going to be transformational. Even though it's not going to be a big college, it's still going to be transformational for this institution. And
but you got to start somewhere, right?
And just you know what? When we started talking about that, I was fortunate that I was the first AD that was ever on the president's cabinet. And I want to thank President Dietz for giving me that opportunity. But to be part of not just the athletic department decision-making and all that, but to be at the table when you're making decisions for the greater institution was so rewarding. The decisions that were being made and the thoughtfulness and, the egos were checked at the door. What are we going to do to make this place better? How are we going to grow this place? And the international component, though, COVID's kind of kick that one in the teeth a little bit, but when that one comes back, that'll certainly help. But it's really interesting when you have really thoughtful, smart people in a room, thinking about what's best for the institution and figuring out a way to make it happen. And you didn't get everything right. Now, a real quick story: we were having a cabinet meeting, and 3 months before that particular cabinet meeting down at Missouri Valley. I think it was Maryville came in to talk to the Valley and the ADs and the SWAs and the faculty reps about esports. And they were very, very successful. And this was way before the pandemic, 4 or 5 years ago. They're very successful at it and talking about how they see it as an enrollment driver, and it's a different kind of kid, and there's a lot of money out there in terms of sponsorships, blah, 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 blah. But we all agreed that's not an NCAA sport. That's not something we would want in the athletic department, but it would be good for the institution to maybe invest in it. So we're in the cabinet meeting, and esports is on the agenda. They had brought in some of the technology people because that's obviously there's a heavy technology component to that.
Yep.
And I could just tell they were a little bit leery about what's athletics going to say about this. Well, anyway, I went through the whole conversation with Maryville, and at the end of the day, I said, that's good for our institution. And they all went, oh. And guess what? They built them their own arena, for crying out loud. They got so many kids that want to be in esports.
Oh, yeah.
Athletics wants to be a partner in that.
John and I have the East Shore jerseys because we play a couple of the games.
It's awesome.
The kids
That's just again growing your institution, for crying out loud.
Jon Diener thinks he could be on the team because he's still gaming.
I missed my calling back then, right?
Right. So, Larry, let's talk about some of the responsibilities and the roles of the AD. And one thing that always comes up on fans is scheduling, right? And is that something that the AD helps in, or they give guardrails, or is it 100% up to the coach and stuff like that? Because you should see the speculation amongst fans on that one. Everywhere.
John and Steve live on the board, and it's...
All right. It's different per sport, but let's just talk about football, men's basketball, okay? Because I'm sure that's the one that those two get the most play.
Yeah.
Football, even when I wasn't the AD, I was the primary football scheduler. But you got to remember, it's only for 3 games because your conference schedule is given to you every year. But when I was before AD, it was part of my role was to work on football scheduling. So we have the Eastern Illinois series. So really, it's only 2 games a year that you're really working on. Typically, one of them is the FBS game, the money game, and then one's another non-conference game. And it fell on me because of the guarantees that were involved and being the finance guy. And I thought football scheduling was a ball. Other than it was a lot of liar's poker because there used to be a former ESPN guy that was trying to kind of not corner the market but help everybody with scheduling, and he would have these calendars that you could look at. Well, you knew if somebody had a date or not if you did your homework. And then it was, well, I don't know. We got to talk to this. We got to hey, wait a minute. Do you want to play or not? Let's get past the BS. So I would say yes, the AD has his hands more in football scheduling than in basketball scheduling. And the thing about football scheduling too, and particularly at our level, at the FCS level, we are playing that guarantee game. Right. And I want to use the Denver Johnson example. I don't remember how many years Denver was our coach, but we'll say it was 10 years. Okay. And I scheduled every one of those money games back then. So in all likelihood, in Denver, I don't think won one of those games. So he automatically had a loss on his career record every year.
Right.
I think Denver's career record was like 55 and 65, maybe. All right. He and every FCS coach they just have to go along with that. Well, Denver was let go, and he took one for everybody else in the athletic department because we scheduled that particular game for him. Because it's a money game, and that money didn't go to football. Yeah. That money went in the operating budget of the athletic department. Everybody participated in that. It's the same for Brock. Now, Brock has won a bunch of those games, which is good for us. But at the FCS level, that's a pretty unique thing, and most coaches don't start their career with a loss every year like that. And in football, you only get 11, usually 11 opportunities. Right. That's a pretty significant percentage of your career that is out of your control. Now, you didn't get to pick Eastern Illinois, and the coach doesn't get to pick your conference. But that was one thing that has always stuck with me about the scheduling piece is that particular thing in football. But again, the athletic director is much more involved in football scheduling. In basketball scheduling, there are guarantees.
Can I ask you a question about the football? So when you call up, let's say you call up the Big Ten school, right? And there's an open date, whatever, it's close enough to drive wherever it is. Does it come down to like the money and the guarantees then? And that's where the poker's coming in? Like, they got 2 other FCS schools, and you want 450 and they're offering 400,000 because school X.
There's a little,
I don't know.
There's a little bit of that, and they're usually juggling a couple of SCS because there's more of us than there are of them trying to get these games.
Right.
Yeah.
We tried to stay in the Central Time Zone. We tried to keep it a bus trip, but there's sometimes it's just because of who's available and who's not. It had to be a flight. Anytime that you flew 2 time zones west, it was brutal on your football team coming home. I remember it was Todd Berry. We played at Utah, Southern Utah, and we played at UNLV in the same month. And we got back, and it was light out when we got back from both of those trips on Sunday morning. I saw the sunrise twice on those days. So 2 time zones, and that for any team, 2 time zones west is a killer coming back. So all these conferences that are, look at the Big Ten. There's going to be 3 time zones. The impact on the student athletes is going to be dramatic on their travel. But again, going back to football, we tried to stay in the Central Time Zone. You'd obviously prefer a bus trip because you maximize your guarantee. We played Illinois in 2003 or 4. That was the first time those 2 schools had played in 50 years. Then we got them again in like 2007 or something like that. And then we weren't scheduled to play them until 2020 again.
COVID.
And it was the COVID year.
Right.
And now we don't have them until 28 because that was the next available year. But I really enjoy it. Now it's a little bit easier now because there's a guy out there that assists literally every school with their football schedule. He knows who's open. He knows who's trying to change. He's trying to help put matchups together. So for the person making the calls, one of the first calls you make is to that guy because he knows where things are at, and he's helping trying to be a middleman and getting that done. And it's a little more high tech because everything's on the internet and that sort of thing. Men's basketball schedule because of the guarantees, and we're going to buy home games so that we have more home games for men's basketball. Plus, you have a better home season ticket package. So you're selling football and you're buying men's basketball. And then you're doing that in conjunction with the basketball coach. They have those contacts. There's more games that you have to deal with, so you're going to allow, and it's not the head coach making all those calls. It's going to be an assistant coach making those calls. But you're trying to agree on a schedule in a given year, trying what you're going to do. Dan always had a really good philosophy in terms of home and homes and trying to balance his schedule. And he was pretty easy to deal with on things like that. Coach Jankovic didn't want to play as tough of a schedule. He was just going to try and win more games. Both of them, they all work in different ways. And you know what? Both of those guys had a 33 and we didn't get in. Jank did and Dan did in 2017. I'll give you the NCAA the committee back then in 2017. They take 2 guys off the basketball committee and they call those 4 or 5 schools that didn't make it. And it was Bruce Rasmussen from Creighton and Tommy Holmoe from BYU called me and said, "Larry, sorry about this, and do you have any questions?" And my question was, and I didn't say it as nice as this, what happened? Why?
Right. Absolutely.
Why?
And
they kind of tap danced around it a little bit, and ultimately, Larry, you didn't play anybody. I said, Bruce, you were in our league, and you won't play us. What are we supposed to do? Crickets. Absolutely. Neither one of them could say a word.
Yeah.
We're not the only one. Missouri State's been, they've had a rough go. We've had a rough go a couple of times. But you're trying to manage your skill. Plus, you're trying to do it on men's basketball, depending on what do you think you have. And if you're going to be a little better, you got to play a little bit better of the schedule. If not, then you got to try and win some games. And at the same time, kind of grow your program, that sort of thing. The other sport that the AD needs to be more involved in, and this goes back to when I was fortunate enough to be on the baseball committee for a couple of years, which was a fabulous experience. Men's basketball committee gets all the publicity, but baseball is the second most popular championship in the NCAA. And if you've never been to the College World Series in Omaha, you got to go do that thing one time. But I was on the baseball committee, and to be in the room and making those decisions that was one of the coolest things I did professionally. But I learned how you need to schedule to get an at-large bid.
Right.
So those conversations with our baseball coaches, if you think that you're going to win the Valley Tournament every year, that's not going to happen. So you've really got to be strategic in your scheduling. And in baseball, it's just a couple of wins can take you a long way. The year we beat Vanderbilt when they were number one, it was I can't remember, it was 19 or anyway, it was Steve's first year. That win carried us in the RPI. Now, we had other really good wins, don't get me wrong, but that carried us, and it was very strategic. You went down, you're going to play a really good team on the road. You're not supposed to win 3 of the games, and you end up winning 1, and it's really.
And the Valley was good that year,
and then
Missouri State, Indiana State. Dallas Baptist.
And then you got to, when you play those teams, you got to beat those teams too. And in baseball, you get more chances because you're playing more games. But there's a lot of strategic thought that needs to go into a baseball schedule as well. So it's not as easy as you think. And the big boys are never going to play us at our place. It doesn't matter emotionally what you think. Yeah. When I was on.
And I remember when I played, we had at Purdue, 3 at Purdue's and 1 at home, right? So my senior year, we had Purdue at home, so we had to play them 3 times at Purdue and 1 at home. And so,
they're not doing that kind. They're not doing 3-for-1s, 2-for-1s. You got to have a relationship. There might be, it's unlikely Ohio State's going to come here because of Ryan's relationship. It'd be nice if they did, but I'm just going to tell you that's unlikely that's going to happen. We couldn't talk Illinois into coming here. Think back to the NIT in the 2017 year. We would have Illinois at our place in a semifinal. It was funny. Our marketing director at the time said it would have been vicious in there had we had that game.
Oh yeah,
but that would have been so much fun. But it didn't happen. But
look at 2004. We talked to Ronnie Cardwell about playing in Illinois going into overtime. That scared the crap out of Bruce Weber. He was never going to come.
And Bruce
near
is
us
a good
again.
guy, but he's not going to do that. I even talked to Bruce about that. The year that we both played in Cancun at the same time. We flew on the same airplane. I mean, I called over to Illinois. Dana Brenner was a colleague over there, and I said, Dana, how are you guys getting down to Cancun? He said, well, we're talking about charter. I said, why don't we just charter one big plane? We can fly out of Bloomington. We control our leave time. We control when we come back. We'll take half the plane. You take half the plane. We can figure out the purchasing part of that. It was an awesome trip. That's not going to happen again, I don't think. So, but does that answer your scheduling question? Did I get in enough detail there?
Yeah. Oh
yeah. Hey, so I'm going to follow that schedule. So with the scheduling, I always notice like with softball and baseball. I mean, they spend half their season down south, right? How do you guys work out all this traveling? I mean, that's just got to be a job by
Softball's
itself.
easier than baseball because softball can take 4 weekends and go to one place and play 8 games or 7 games. It all comes down to they need 2 or 3 pitchers and baseball needs 15. That's the huge difference between those two sports. So softball can get a lot of games in a short period of time. Baseball, you can get 3 in a weekend. If you try and push 4 in there, then you're really stretching your pitching staff. So the scheduling is very, very different. You're right. For northern schools, it's unfair. Somebody like LSU isn't going to leave Baton Rouge. They're going to play 30 games at home before. Mark Kingston, one of my good friends in the business. He was our baseball coach. Now he's at South Carolina. He's not leaving Columbia, South Carolina to go play anybody, unless it's Clemson and a midweek game.
Right.
Not in the non-conference. I mean, his conference, that SEC baseball is too hard. So it's hard for them. But Steve's done a really good job of finding. We've won at Arkansas.
Oh yeah, that was
we've won at Vanderbilt. You don't have to win the series; you got to win a game. Your kids want to go play those games. That's like the football guys; they want to go play at Wisconsin. Right. But you're not going to do that. 10 times, but you can maybe do it once. But what happened to us there? And Wisconsin's always been a team that we've tried to avoid because you have to be physical to go play those guys. What happens? We lose Cole Mueller, our best running back.
Oh, yeah.
You don't want your quarterback to get hurt in that game. You got to be careful about some of those games, but then you might bank in a field goal at Northwestern and you get to win a game. So, yeah.
So, Larry, another topic that always comes up, especially with this conference chaos that's going now and conference realignments, is especially with regards to football, FCS versus FBS. So, can you just share some thoughts on that, especially from the perspective of a school like ISU?
Wow, it's a great question, and it's whenever I did a class presentation, this question came up too.
Yeah.
There's so many angles to that question. Let me start by saying you have to really know who you are and what your strengths are in terms of making that decision. If it's purely a football decision, you're going to be thinking about different things. But if you're concerned about the other 18 sports, and in our case, historically we've been a basketball school, you better think about what it's going to do to your men's basketball program, depending on what you do with your football program. Where are you going to go? I'm going to ask that question back to you guys. Let's just say we're having the conversation. Where are we going to go? Is it the MAC? Is it the MAC? And if it's the MAC, do you want to play on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday?
That's the things that pop up, right? Those are discussions.
Those are the questions.
Is that the best place for your men's basketball program? Is that the best place for your baseball program? Is that the best place for your women's basketball program? Let alone your other sports?
Or you end up in Conference USA and you're traveling all over the place, right?
Right. Conference USA, which is not Conference USA anymore because now it's different. I think there was an argument before the pandemic and before the latest round that the American might be a place to go. But then again, the travel part, the budgetary part of that thing becomes a discussion. Big East is out because they don't play football. Football is important to Illinois State, in my opinion. Yep. Homecoming and family weekend and all the intangibles. Now that we have a stadium that you can actually host a game and feel good about it. Remember the zoo and those 15 rows of crappy bleachers on the east side? That was embarrassing. How we ever got anybody to come here and play football? There's a reason maybe we weren't very good. But now, Hancock Stadium is a beautiful place. It's the right size. If you're going to go to FBS, you're going to have to significantly change the footprint of your stadium. The budgetary implications are pretty dramatic, and it's just not 23 more scholarships or 22 more scholarships. It's more assistant coaches, it's more trainers, it's more strength coaches, it's more academic support. That list goes on and on and on. And you're probably going to have to do some things for your other sports relative to their budgets, depending on where you go. So it's not that simple, but I go back to where are you going to go? That's the best possible fit. Not emotionally where you think you could go, but where are you going to go? There's been conversations, mainly by the media, about North Dakota State. Where are they going to go?
Right.
Are they going to just go as a football program? Are they going to take their other sports with them? They're going to have to make a stadium decision. The Fargo Dome isn't big enough.
Right.
We draw more fans than some of the MAC schools.
Absolutely.
Right.
So there's a whole bunch of things that go into that discussion. I want to take you back to the 70s. And think about this. Illinois State had just kind of exploded coming out of the 60s. And they were pretty good athletically. Baseball won a championship. Basketball was really good. The other sports were pretty good. But think about the early 70s. And it was Doug Collins, and it was D.A. Weibring, and it was Dave Bergman, and it was, I don't think Kathy Boswell was there then, but it might have been Charlotte Lewis, might have been back. Think about how good Illinois State was back in the early 70s. If they would have had the forethought to expand Illinois State athletics back then, and I'm not saying anything bad about the decision makers back then.
Right.
But
They didn't know any better. Right. They made the
but
best
think,
decision with the information
I'll
they had.
I'll put it in these terms: Bloomington, Normal, Illinois; Columbia, Missouri; Ames, Iowa. Just think of the names of these towns. I picked a couple Big 12 ones there, but Champaign, Bloomington, Indiana, West Lafayette. We were no different.
Right.
But we didn't think about that back then. To me, that hurts the decision now as much as anything, because we weren't thinking about it back then. Again, not saying anything bad about them, but boy, there was a time that if you're going to make the move, that was probably the time to do it.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Yeah.
That was
So
probably.
if you had to pull out your crystal ball and look forward, I mean, the whole football lands is changing that whole landscape. I mean, do they eventually break off and have the top 64 teams, and then there's another 60, FBS teams that are on the outside looking in, and do they merge with the FCS? And so naturally it starts progressing that way anyways. Is that some of the forethought too?
And, I think that you have to think about that, but before you think about those top ones breaking off, just look at the haves and the have-nots in the Big Ten.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
The haves or the have-nots. Just pick any of the Power Five. The differences in budget in the Big Ten are as dramatic as the differences in budget between FBS and FCS.
Absolutely.
So at that level, there's some schools that can't compete for a national championship. They can compete.
Right.
And I'm not saying that, but realistically, we're talking about the same 8 to 10 schools every year. Every now and then, somebody pops up because they've got a really good quarterback, or they've got a good run for a couple of years. But primarily, it's going to be the same schools every year. I don't think it would help the other sports if football went off on their own.
Right.
It doesn't help basketball. It doesn't help the women's sports. It doesn't help baseball. Money may dictate that, which is too bad, because money dictates a lot of the stuff now.
Yeah.
But there's
back then, too.
some things to be said about this. Truly is, well, not anymore, but I think it's pure amateur athletics, though the money at the higher levels is pretty dramatic. There's some things that maybe we shouldn't mess with. I don't think.
Yeah.
I don't think. Expanding the football playoffs, I think, will help, because it'll bring some more Cinderellas into the thing, which is what makes the men's basketball.
That's what makes it great.
Right. So, I would hope that they don't split off. The NCAA needs to modernize. The NCAA needs to do a lot of things. But let's think about this too. The NCAA is us. It's the member institutions ultimately are making decisions, and you hire people to administer it. The NCAA is this ivory tower over in Indianapolis just doing things on their own. No. It's the institutions, 360 or so that are in Division I, are making decisions for Division I. And think about that disparity.
Right.
From the very top, the highest budget, to the very bottom. I mean, there's some schools that are trying to do their athletic budget at the Division I level that don't have as much budget as some of the football coaches are individually getting paid.
Right.
So that's it. It's very complicated. There's not an easy answer to that one.
So speaking of money, let's talk about fundraising, right? So how's that changed? You first came in late 80s to now. I mean, that whole landscape is just so much different. And
yeah, it's
talk about the approach back then versus like what you have to do now for fundraising.
Everybody's bread and butter has been their annual fund, and it's based. Usually, it's either around your football ticket sales or your men's basketball ticket sales, and it's a donation to allow you to buy a seat in a certain location and park in a certain location. That's the gold standard for everybody. Is how do you maximize your annual fund and develop those people. But then when the facility race took off, and institutions couldn't help athletics build facilities, and you had to fundraise, that turned it into you had to become a more professional fundraising organization, and you had to have conversations with people who had significant wealth, ask them to try and help you. And that's where, again, the bigger institutions with much larger alumni bases have a built-in advantage too.
Absolutely.
Illinois State is growing into its next era of development. That culture of philanthropy. Now that we've had 2 campaigns, and we're seeing our graduates expand their world beyond education. And there's more professionals, there's more doctors and lawyers and such, if I can say that. There's going to be engineers coming down the road. As the Illinois State alums become more wealthy and they're starting to age and they need to do some of that wealth, it's going to start trickling back, not just to athletics, but to the institution as a whole. For years, the directionals in Illinois State didn't have to fundraise.
Right.
Athletics did because we needed to support our budget. Now you're going to have to find those individuals who want to help you. That's how you get an indoor built. You found enough people who thought enough of you to help you get an indoor built.
Right.
That's how the Dakotas are getting things done. Now they don't have pro sports up there, so their people up there support their state institutions, but they only have 2 each, for crying out loud. So you got to pick one, but that's okay. That's what their game is up there. So fundraising has become very important in terms of continuing to offset the cost increases. Most people don't know that when Al Bowman gave us permission to go with the football stadium, a major chunk of that was going to come through existing student fees. It wasn't a new fee, but there was an existing fee that was going to be repurposed to help pay for the stadium, because it was going to be more than just a football stadium. Athletics agreed to fundraise the first $5 million because of the timing of the fees becoming available, and we did that based on the club seats and donations and things like that. But that facility has become, because of the name Aaron Leach Club, the most unique, cool place to entertain in Bloomington Normal. It's just not a football suite. It's everything else you can think of to put in there, and it's got the coolest view of about any entertaining space in Illinois, for crying out loud, other than maybe Northwestern's indoor, because it looks on Lake Michigan or something like that. But that's a campus facility that is more than just an athletic facility. It's going to be, and it's going to continue to be like that. It's the pressure to fundraise, to do more, and to offset the rising costs. And the hotels and the restaurants and the bus lines and the airlines and everything that we're buying, those people don't care what our budget's like. They gotta meet their bottom line too. So they're not going to give us any more breaks. The pressure for athletic directors at all levels to meet their budgets and to keep their facilities upgraded and it's going to have to a lot of it's going to have to come from private donors. There's no question.
Yeah. Is that where it helps too, like long term, adding a school of engineering? Because let's face it, their potential earning power is much greater, right? Than other majors and stuff like that. So, and then EA Sports, some of those things too. No, seriously, there's a long term return. I don't know if you guys talk about that.
Yeah, there is, and you got to first of all, you got to find them, and then determine if there's an interest and what is their interest. But I will tell you, the largest gift to the institution in the last campaign came to athletics. Ironically, they're both education alums who have done very well outside of education.
Wow.
So it can happen, but they took their education degrees and they went into the business world and became very successful. But there's people out there. There's Illinois State alums who have been very, very successful. You need to identify them and develop relationships with them and see what they're interested in. And it doesn't make a difference if they want to support art or esports or athletics or whatever. It doesn't matter because it's helping the institution. Right. And that's gonna a big part of it. I will tell you, the improvements to Uptown Normal help recruit students and their parents more than most people realize. It's that whole package there is a big part of, and that the foresight of Normal to support its largest employer, and an institution that's not going anywhere. That town and gown relationship is vital to the success. of the community and of Illinois State.
I got a question for you,
Sure.
Larry. One of the things Dan Butterly said during his episode was some of those, Big Ten schools that you mentioned just 2 minutes ago that can't compete with, like the Ohio State and their $200 million budget. But some of them are staying just because the Big Ten network pays them so much money, right? Has the Missouri Valley Conference ever thought about having their own network? I mean, how hard is that to do? Is that crazy, or are we just going to end the interview right here because that's a dumb question?
It's a great question, but Missouri Valley does have its own network. It's on ESPN Plus and ESPN3, and that's how literally everybody else below the Power Fives are doing it. Now, I remember those discussions way back in the day when we were talking about it, and it was going to require a pretty significant investment in technology. And then you're going to have to staff it. And some of the schools are saying, I don't know. But if you partner with your communications department and other academic units, it's one of the best things we've done to get our word out, and we can all watch them. And streaming is where it's going. And you got to put up with a young announcer every now and then on a particular campus.
Yeah,
that's not why you're watching, is to listen to him. You're watching the Redbirds play somewhere.
Right.
That's our network. There's a little bit of value there. We're never going to, the Big Ten Network and the SEC Network and all those, we're never going to have something like that. We don't have the communities, we don't have the alumni bases, we don't have that cachet. The media is going to support the big guys as opposed to supporting the little guys. Cinderella is going to be good every now and then, but that's not enough to pay for the advertisers to invest in them. I wish it would. Okay, I want you to think back. I'm glad you brought up the Big Ten Network. I want you to think back. The football coaches and administrators get together up in the Big Ten office because most people, I don't know if most people know or not know, but the football officials in the Missouri Valley are like Class A, and they move up to the MAC, which would be Triple A, and they move up to the Big Ten. So that's the pecking order, and we're all in this consortium together. So we go up to the Big Ten office and have our football meetings in February, and they've got a room up there where there's, I don't know how many flat screens are up there, and DV Sport has 2 full-time staff there managing their technology. It's really kind of cool to go up there, and they can pull up any play from the past year that you want to watch, and you can discuss, was it targeting or whatever it was. But I've often wanted to find out where the color printer is in the Big Ten office, where all that money comes from. But think back, I kind of got off track there, but think back, when did things really start to change financially? Ohio State was always bigger than Illinois State budget-wise. The Big Ten Network changed everything.
Yeah.
Changed everything. It changed the money that the schools are getting. It changed their investment in facilities. It changed their investment in salaries. It changed everything because and it was brilliant by Jim Delaney to do that.
No, it was.
It changed everything. And it all got bigger.
So let's talk about our conference. One of my favorite events is the Missouri Valley Conference basketball tournament. We go down there. It's not just because I'm hanging out with these guys. Seriously, I think every Redbird basketball fan should go down to the conference. Whether it's men's, go to the men's tournament, women's, go to the women's tournament. And it's great in St. Louis, right? Because you can walk around. You meet tons of new people, and you form like all these different bonds and stuff like that. So, we've been down there, and Pemberton likes to meander all over the place and talk to everybody, right? And he's talked to you there as well. Well,
bother him probably is a better word.
Yeah, he can never sit in his seat, right? And the seats we get are never good enough or whatever. So, Pemberton, tell us the story about, like, we're sitting in our seats, but somehow we end up in
Larry had a death in the family.
Yeah.
And said, I'm not going to be here on Sunday, so if you want to sit in the seats, go take my seats.
But whose seats did we end up in?
We were in Larry's seats.
No.
Yes, we were.
We were
in front of Dietz.
No, we were in President Dietz' seats.
No, we were in front of him.
No, we were in President... You're wrong, John. We were in President Dietz' seats. He comes in and looks at us. And by the way, this guy leaves.
He was not there. Jon was not there.
He was not there. He's walking around, meandering again, talking, and Steve and Jon are sitting in President Dietz seats. Okay, he comes and it's super nice, right? He looks at us. And he sits behind us, Jon, but we were in his seats.
Larry Lyons' seats were in front of President Dietz. I'm telling
Jon,
you what.
I never sat in front of President Dietz. I was always behind him. Hey, let's talk about the tournament. I think it's awesome. My son-in-law, my daughter married a great guy from Memphis. He walked on and played basketball at Georgia for a couple of years. Very cool.
Yeah.
He came to the Valley Tournament last year. It was just a boys' trip. None of the girls came. The spouses didn't come. He was very impressed by the Missouri Valley Conference Tournament. Obviously, the building's been upgraded. That was nice, but he was very impressed by the Valley Tournament.
Yeah.
It's going to be significantly different next year because we're going to have 4 games on Thursday. We're going to have 4. If we're going to have 8, those 4 games are going to play into the 4 seeds. So that Thursday stigma is going to have to go away because there's more people playing into the top 4. So that, and you.
And getting that by the first day is going to be crucial.
You want to be that top 4 teams, yes. Playing back-to-back 3 games is tough. Done it multiple times, and to add a 4th game in.
It's going to change the dynamic for the fans. It used to be a Thursday night. Now there's going to be an afternoon session on Thursday.
Yeah.
Well, and I always told these guys, if I'm flying, because I used to live in Phoenix, I've now moved, Bloomington normal, but I would tell these guys, if I'm flying in, right, and we lose early, we're not leaving. We're staying for the whole tournament because they could just drive back to Chicago at the time, right? And so I kept threatening them, no, right? So, but we love watching basketball. We're there for all those games.
I will tell you, one of the things that gave me the most anxiety was Thursday was no fun to play on, but the Friday game was the most important game to me as an athletic director because if we won that game, it made your fans feel like they were there for the weekend. The 2-night minimum wasn't an issue. Paying for the tickets wasn't an issue.
Right.
They were going to get another day, possibly 2 days in St. Louis. I was more anxious about the Friday game for not just about the win or the loss. It was about how it impacted our people that went down there because Redbird fans have been very good to supporting our team and very good to that tournament down there.
All right, so Larry, thank you so much. Larry was my athletic director when I was at Illinois State. We always give you a chance to wrap up. Anything you want to close with?
Well, first of all, again, say thanks, guys, for taking the time and allowing me to share a few stories and ramble a little bit about college athletics. But when we made the move in '87 as a family to join the Redbird family, my two brothers were thrilled because I gave up my season tickets over in Champaign, and they got free tickets. But athletics becomes a lifestyle. If you're really doing it for the right reason, it's not the sexy reason to go to the games and stuff, but the right reason to support the student athletes and to make their experience the best thing possible, you've got to commit. It's nights and it's weekends and it's 365 days a year. And I'm a little cliche there when I say that, but if you're really doing it right for the right reasons, you've got to commit. And my family, my wife, and my kids grew up there. Redbird Arena is a hell of a babysitter when they're little.
Yeah.
Give them a ball and let them loose. Tell them not to go up in the upper bowl. But the experiences that they had and that we have, I look back and I would not change that lifestyle for anything. It's been rewarding. It's been frustrating at times. The losses have been hard at times. The friendships that you make, people, coaches are committed to doing the right thing and growing. Leroy Watkins played with Dan, came from nothing, walked out of there with a degree, is successful.
Yep.
I mean, that's the poster child for what we're doing. And everybody lose sight of that because it's about winning.
Right.
All of the degrees, all of the success stories, all. You take a 17 or 18-year-old young man or young woman, and they leave there grown up, more mature.
Right.
To see that's so rewarding. Again, that probably sounds cliche, but if you're doing it for the right reasons, you're impacting people's lives. And then the people that work their butts off, the trainers and the strength coaches and the academic support people and, the facility guys. And, just think of all those people who work their tails off to provide that for the student athletes so they can compete in front of all the fans who want to do it because they're having fun.
Right.
It's it's a great place. And then and I was lucky enough to be on the president's leadership team to help bring the institution forward. It's been awesome for me. It's been great for my family, and I was so fortunate that back in 1987 I was able to join that athletics world, and I grew up quite a bit. And then I was lucky enough to be an AD. There's 350 of them in the country. That's a pretty small fraternity.
Small
Right.
group.
Or sorority.
Yeah.
I mean, we got to be inclusive there. But
Yeah.
to have that chance, it's been very, very rewarding. And I'm glad I did it at Illinois State because even Ron said, Illinois State's in one of those places that's in the sweet spot. Where it's a great place, it's a great community, and we're doing things that are, we're trying to win championships, but we're producing really good people, and they're going out in the world and they're being successful. So,
Yep, and thank you.
Yeah,
Right.
thank you guys.
From you and from Ron Wellman and Beth Landis, who is my academic advisor, and Ruben and Doc and all the people that helped us get degrees and win games, and Mr. Young over in facilities, and they were always getting us in the gym, working free throws, and so what a great family to be a part of, and that's why I do all the alumni stuff, and so. All right, this is a wrap for Bird Fans Forever. This is episode 23 with Larry Lyons, the AD. Jon, hit it.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.